Are we here? Okay, we are live, I think.
Yes.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our C3 Artist Talk, episode 3, that's presented by CHEN Project. Over the next few weeks, we'll be going live every Tuesday to speak with the semi-finalists of our core choreography competition. We want to give them space to share their thoughts, perspectives, and to learn more about their work. The winner of C3 competition will set a new work on CHEN Project Dancers for our next season, aiming for fall 2021. Woohoo! Stay tuned for updates. My name is Jessica Chen, and I am Artistic Director of CHEN Project and one of your hosts this evening. My preferred pronouns is she, her, hers, and I am occupying stolen Lenape land, which is currently referred to as Hell's Kitchen, New York. Thank you so much for joining me, and here with me is Neysha.
Hi, I'm Neysha Merced. I am a CHEN Project dancer, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am also occupying stolen Canarsie and Muncie Lenape land.
Great. So we like to first start with some announcements. So Neysha, why don't you take us through some community announcements and company announcements?
Okay. Every week, we'd like to highlight just different events and news and organizations in the dance community that have been inspiring us during this time, as well as updates from the company, like Jessica just said. Dance NYC is a dance service organization that has been an arts hero during this time. CHEN Project is honored to be one of 56 dance-making organizations to be a recipient of the second iteration of their coronavirus dance relief fund. In addition to funding relief, Dance NYC also hosts a weekly dance field call to share resources and information for dancers, dance makers, and arts leaders during this time. We will share links in the chat box below. Dance NYC is also declaring loudly that arts are necessary workers. Artists are necessary workers. So if you see that hashtag, artists are necessary workers, that is for us. We are also featuring Arts on Site. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing artists with affordable studio rentals and opportunities for artists to develop new works. They have 2 studio spaces in the East Village, as well as the R&R residency program in upstate New York. 2 of our guests, Michelle, who you met last week, and Rohan, who you'll meet in our next episode, will perform their work this Thursday. So check that out for a chance to see a live dance performance. For our last announcement, the 2020 census is here. Please complete the census if you have not already. It happens every 10 years and the deadline is on September 30th, so you have about a week left. The census data is used to distribute billions of dollars for crucial federal programs and resources, including the arts and culture. If you don't take the census, the city will not receive sufficient funding to support its citizens and the arts. So it's quick and easy. It takes about 10 minutes to complete. It's safe, secure, and confidential. Your information and privacy are protected. So please fill out the 2020 census. It's really important for the funding in the arts. And back to Jessica.
Okay, awesome. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We will keep including links in our chat box. I also want to say now that if you are with us tonight, if you can just comment in the chat box so that we know that you're here. We can see the number of viewers, but we don't know who's here. So we would love to engage with you. And to also please include any comments or questions that you may have throughout the evening. Neysha will be gathering them for the Q&A part of the show at the end of the show with our entire panel. So if you have a question, type it in. We want to hear. And then lastly, before we start, I just want to kindly ask for your patience. Should we experience any technical difficulties, we will do our best to troubleshoot as we navigate this fun and cool and weird and scary digital space that we're in right now. So without further ado, we'll say goodbye to Neysha for a little bit. And then we'll bring on our first guest this evening, which is Francisco Graciano. Francisco, hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Why don't we start if you can just introduce yourself and to share a bit about you and your work.
Sure. So my name is Francisco Graciano. I go by Cisco. My preferred pronouns are he, his, him. I'm on land, the Tonkawa and Humanos people, which is now referred to as San Antonio, Texas. I'm a choreographer, a former full-time dancer, and a photographer. I like to just give myself the title of dance artist because I like to dabble in everything. I don't like to pigeonhole myself in one thing. I am originally from San Antonio, Texas, which is where I am now. My family, I was born and raised here. My father was a Mexican who was a mariachi, so that sort of really identified who I was going to be as an artist, as a creator. I grew up, started dancing ballet, and then did my BFA in undergrad in dance, and then I went to New York, and right after I graduated college, danced for several companies, and then in 2004, Paul Taylor asked me to join Taylor 2, and then a couple of years afterwards, he hired me into the main company, and I was there until the summer of 2017. And during that time, I was in a place where I was really feeling like I needed to find my own voice. And one of the things that was great about dancing for Paul was that he was always very encouraging about the individual coming out through his work. And I found my voice through his work. But at some point, doing cover songs over and over, you start to feel like there's this egging at you where you need to start making your own stuff. So I did. A few years before I left the company, I started choreographing and just got my hands on and asked friends to start working with me. And at first it was just an experimental way of getting to understand what my body was saying. And over the years, I think I've become a little more stylized in my own way, but at the same time, I try to break out of any habits I have or see that start to develop. So my work tends to be very athletic, and my dancers love me because they, I'm being facetious, because they are completely exhausted in my rehearsals and after shows, and so am I when I dance my work. But one of the things that I've been interested in, I did my graduate, I did graduate school at Florida State University. I just graduated with my Master of Fine Arts, yay, last month. But the thing I was looking into was transformation, which is interesting because we all seem to be in a major transformation right now. I was really interested in how transformation is felt in the body and how it manifests itself into choreography on bodies in space. So a lot of my work is what I do is based on sensation and how we feel in the moment. So I start by, most of the way I start is just by sensing where I am. And there's usually a piece of music that comes with that, that I'm inspired by. That music will tend to inform the dynamic and the impulse of the movement and the drive of the movement. But from there, that's where the information is. So it was one of the difficult things about grad school for me was, and I got pretty good at this, was describing in words what you're interested in researching and what you're interested in going for, and not really just feeling it getting into the studio. So I thrive in the studio. My research comes from just moving. Research, big word, comes from just moving, getting into space and moving. And then paired with the music, then I'm informed about what is sort of in my subconscious. I think the subconscious is in the entire body. So the way I work is asking where you feel this movement, and then let's build something based on that impulse. That's kind of how I build phrase material. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. I mentioned that I try to get out of my box as often as possible. Right now, I'm working with an actor who isn't a dancer at all. It's not someone I would just grab and start working with. We are working on a text that I found by this author named Gordon Lish, very abstract literature, and looking at really simple minimalist movement that goes from a seated position to a standing position in the span of like 5 minutes, and with the text on top of that. Where are the intricacies and where's the transformation in your body in those moments? That's the interesting part for me right now. But I'm also at this point, because of this pandemic and we're all displaced, I did a lot of dance film in grad school also. So I'm getting into that a little bit more. And that's where my interests really are going a little more. Still very interested and want to show work on the proscenium stage, but I really enjoy dance film. And right now, the interesting thing about creating right now is the question is, how do you create remotely? So if you're creating a dance film, I had this experience working with, I did Broadway, Dance Lab New York's Nexus Lab earlier this summer, where I created a dance on Zoom, and it was a Zoom live performance. And I thought, how interesting, and could that be could that method be used to create a dance film? So one of the other things I'm working on right now is remotely creating a dance film with a dancer, a friend of mine in New York. And that's the biggest bone I have to pick with myself, is that a lot of labor is on the dancer. So I'm telling the dancer how to frame the shot, what to do in the camera, how to do it. And I'm just kind of sitting back and the dancer's doing all the work. So, and this is all on iPhone. So I have, like everybody else here, I'm sure I have this urge to continue to create, and you feel it even more in your body, I think, when you're displaced, when you're away from your hub, your creative hub. So I'm trying to figure out how to solve that. And the Dance Lab New York, the Nexus Lab experience was incredibly beneficial for that. But creating this new dance film with my friend in New York is also a new experiment, and who knows? But right now we're just saying yes to the unexpected. But I do think the transformation in all of us, in our society, is important, and it's important to feel and know where it is in your body. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that. That's me, Jessica.
Amazing.
In a sloppy nutshell.
Yeah, so I think that is a beautiful thing, and how what you're saying, the role of choreography is, it can shift and ebb and flow. You know, right now with the remote work and remote creativity, a lot of falls more on the dancer, and you're kind of stepping back in terms of the vision of everything. That's kind of what I hear.
Yeah, it's a lot more collaborative now.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
just have to step back and
yeah.
allow.
Well, what I was curious, because when we chat before, you mentioned that you were in New York for 19 years, and so I am wondering, and 13 years with Taylor, and if I'm doing the math correctly, and also you were founding like a founding dancer in a lot of smaller companies. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective how New York's like dance landscape has shifted and changed and ebbed and flow like during your time in New York.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first off, I think that I have to give props to Gina Gibney, because can we just have a round of applause? What she's done with the dance community and allowed to bring uh, this amazing dance space, these two amazing dance spaces to the city, has helped tremendously. And the funding that she's gotten for new artists to come in and play and experiment at a really affordable cost is one of the reasons, I think, why um, we're seeing more creators in the field. Um, I remember distinctly taking class I got to New York in '99, and I was taking class at Gibney or somewhere in 2000, 2001. And one of the teachers was looking at the board with auditions and dance companies and performances that were coming up with me. And I was just like, wow, like there's all this stuff. I'm still young and new to New York. And she goes, she said, it's so sad. This used to be overflowing in the 90s. And then, and so it made me sort of take a step back and realize like how much more work artists have to do these days. Because what I saw as this cornucopia of creative work was just really sparse to someone else. But I think uh, it is harder, but I think I have seen new creators come up, and what I've been inspired by is the people who are just out there to do it because they have to, because it's like their right hand, picking up a pen. They don't know anything else, and uh, they don't know any other way to live without dance, without creativity in the dance field. So it's been really interesting. It's been a really interesting view. You caught me off guard. I should have prepared for this question, because there's so much. The dance field is really, it's always evolving. It's just like New York. It's not the same as it was 10 years ago. And of course, after 9/11, that was, I mean, emotions and the way people reacted to it artistically was it was really profound. So
Yeah. You bring up 9/11, and I wasn't here in New York during that time, and well, you're not here in New York right now, but I'm wondering what was it. There's been a lot of comparisons between the feeling and how the devastation of the performing arts community, or even just the city, after that time, and then it compared to what we're experiencing recently. And so what, in some words, like what was it like being an artist during that time where people are questioning the future of the city, and how it's going to come out of that time.
well, I don't have any profound response for you because I was still pretty young. I got to New York when I had just turned 21, and I was just like banging away trying to get a job. But what I can comment on is the level of for those of us who were there during 9/11, this level of community that just kind of went through the roof. The intensity of the community that kind of went through the roof is something that I imagine might be happening now also in New York, because I feel it from here. it doesn't matter where I am right now. I have all my, my friends and my connections are in New York. But especially in the beginning of the lockdown, the connecting with friends was even more, it was more frequent, which is a lot like how it was, for me, my experience of, the reaction to, the World Trade Center bombings, 9/11. It was, again, the sense of community. We're all in this together. We hear that a lot these days. We're all in this together, being there for each other, because it's hard. It's grief. I mean, we're all experiencing grief, and the same from the same source. So, it's terrible that we have to, experience it. It's terrible that we have to actually be living in this time. But how wonderful is it when we can reflect and say, "But look how we're communicating now," and even more frequently, I would argue, in some cases. So.
Okay, awesome. I have one more question for you, for now, and it's, you've danced for so many companies, and you were part of Taylor for so many years, seeing, even just probably within the company, the culture shifts. Is there any part of you were there ever any aspirations to start a company of your own, or are you happy freelancing?
No, never. No, never. I so I loved dancing for Paul. I had the best time. And when I was in the company, I remember Paul. I won't tell that story, but you can ask me some other time. I remember talking to a lot of friends at the time, and who were starting dance companies and had, some level of success, and how difficult it was for them and how hard it was on them, and regardless of how much they loved it, and I just thought, like, I don't know if that's for me. I mean, I like this creative thing, but I'm not sure if that's the company, the nonprofit arts organization is a thing I want to do. But then there's the argument for, like, if you've got a crew of dancers who get to know you, then you can be a little more articulate. So there's that argument too. But the reason I don't find myself pigeonholing myself is because I want to work with different people all the time. So when I get a group of dancers together and we work on a really good project, that is incredible, and I would absolutely work with them again. But chances are good that I'll do pretty well with a bunch of dancers who I don't know either. So that's my passion.
Yay. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Francisco. We're just going to say bye to him for a little bit. He'll be back at the end. So if you have questions, if you're just joining us late, please comment in the chat box so we know you're there, and then ask any questions or share any thoughts that you have that pop up with the talk. And so now we're going to move into our second guest this evening. We have Lynn Mullen. Lynn, are you there?
Hi.
Hello. Hi, Lynn. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about you and your work.
Okay, so my name is Lynn Mullen. I am 16 years old. My chosen pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I live in Los Angeles, California, which is Chumash, Kiz, and Tongva land. So first of all, I just wanted to say a really big thank you to Jessica Chen and CHEN Project for giving me this opportunity to grow and develop something that I feel so passionate about. And I feel so honored to be a part of this group of just incredibly talented and successful choreographers and dancers. So a little bit about me. I am a Swedish American. My parents moved over here from Sweden just a year before I was born. So I have really strong roots in both countries, and I definitely grew up as a blend of both cultures, which plays into how I dance and how I choreograph. So I started dancing ballet as a kid at a Russian ballet studio, and it was all I did until I was about 8. And when I was 8, I took my very first contemporary class. And I just remember being completely blown away with it because I had never experienced anything that wasn't how you have to have perfection in these perfect positions and lines and movements. There was a right way to do it. In contemporary, of course, there's a technique, there's modern, there's Gordon, there's Lamone, there's Cunningham and Graham. There's all these different techniques and ways that you should do it, but there's not that same strict, rigid way of moving that it is in ballet. And I think that was what really affected me in the beginning. So I'd never known anything other than that. So I took a class with, my teacher was named Oscar Kondo, and from that first class, I just completely fell in love with it. And I felt like I could move so freely. And I also fell in love with her style of movement and dance. And therefore, as this was my first glimpse into modern dance, it's also a really big part now of how I move and dance and choreograph. So fast forward a while, I'm currently a junior at the Orange County School of the Arts, or OSHA, where I study in the Classical and Contemporary Dance Conservatory with my wonderful director, Mr. Stephen Hyde. And I'm also a member of a contemporary youth company called Compass Dance, which was founded and is directed by Miss Amanda K. White, who is also a founding member of Backhouse Dance Company in Southern California. So my interest in choreography really started when I got to OSHA because for the first time I got to take classes in composition and choreography with Gracelyn White and Laura Berg, who are choreographers from LA. And it really blew me away because I'd always loved making up little dances, but I'd never known how to do it with a structure or framework to do it in a more professional way. And I remember just completely falling in love with this idea where I got to be the creator and I got to decide how I was going to move and what I was going to do and the different formations I was going to create. So fast forward to my second year at OSHA, Mr. Hyde brought in a guest choreographer and teacher, and her name was Jessica Chen. And I immediately just loved her style and her teaching, and her story and how she created her company really spoke to me. So I applied to be a mentee at her summer program, which I did that summer. And to me, that program really stood out because it wasn't just a normal summer intensive with dance lessons or learning choreography, but it was a mentorship in everything surrounding it. It was how to get in touch with the dance business, with other dancers, and how to make important contacts, and how to get on stage and auditions, and finding ways to show your work and live as a dancer. So that was a really important life lessons that I learned. And I think this was really important to me because it was the first time that I really knew that dance was going to be a permanent thing in my life. Because before that, I had always thought of dance as my hobby, and it was what I would do until I got to college, and then I would use it to get into college, and then I would have another professional career. But those weeks that I was there, I would wake up in the morning and I was so excited to just get to class and get to rehearsal. And it was a feeling that I thought I don't ever want to have to wake up and not feel this way again. And that's when I knew that this is something that I actually might want to pursue and do. And then when I got back to California, I became obsessed with choreographing. So it became my favorite class and one of my favorite things to do in my pastime. And one of my private teachers, Miss Amanda K. White, really started helping me with this because I compete in competitions like YGP almost every year. And so for the past few years, she's been really helping me choreograph my own pieces, which has been really fun because it's been like getting extra choreography classes, which then leads into I'm a member of her company, Compass Dance, where she started giving me these opportunities to choreograph on other groups of people. And that was the first time that I was choreographing on people other than myself, and the first time that I was choreographing more than just solos or duets and trios with myself. So that was actually a really cool learning experience because it wasn't just how to choreograph, but how to teach your choreography and how to convey the different artistry and emotions that you want your dancers to portray as a message to the audience. Yeah, so then eventually quarantine happened, and California has been in shelter in place for a really long time. So I've had some free time outside of school, which was when Miss Amanda started sending me all these details about different places where I could submit my choreography, whether that was festivals or films and even competitions. So I started doing that, and I received an award from Young Creators Challenge, which kind of propelled me to submit to even more places. So I submitted to Moving Forward Dallas and got a scholarship to study with Madison Hicks in Dallas, um, even though that's gotten postponed. So still really excited for that, but not yet because of quarantine. And I think through all of this, I've just really discovered why I love choreography so much in modern dance. And it's because to me, it's completely limitless. And of course, there's this baseline structure that you need, whether it's technique or a frame. But if you think about it, anything can be choreography because if you actually look at the definition of choreography, it's the art or practice of designing sequences of movements of physical bodies. So if you think about it, really everything that we do is choreographed. And I actually had a teacher tell me once that everything we do, we see choreography every single day. We see it in traffic, we see it in airports. It's limitless. And that's why I love it so much because anything and everything can be choreography, which is why it's so freeing. It's all up to you and it's all up to your mind, which is why adding on to what Francisco was saying about breaking out of your box and your comfort zone, which is really great advice. That's what I've been trying to do because if you break out of your normal habits of choreographing, you'll find that there's the smallest details that you can use to choreograph. And the more different places you go and the more different concepts you use and different things that you think about, whether that's a concept or a story, it's such a wide range of possibilities. So since I am technically one of the next generations of dance, people have also asked me what I think the future of dance is going to be like. And to be completely honest, I cannot say exactly, but from what I know, at least dance started out as a part of ritual and culture, and it mostly originates in folk dancing and tribal dancing. And I mean, ballet, I'm pretty sure came from square dancing in France because King Louis XIV really liked it. And so a long time ago, dancers used to be really praised and worshipped, and they were some of the most respected people in society. So how our status went from that to where we are now is kind of strange to me because dancing used to be culture and dancing still is culture and it's an art form and a way of expression, but it's almost like now we've turned it into something commercial. It's used mostly for the final product, whether that's a performance on a stage or a music video, and that's kind of saddening that it's gone away from what it originally started as. And I think we should kind of loop back to that because when people think of dance, they'll think of one of a few things. For example, they'll think of ballet, which from what I've experienced is kind of like there's a hierarchy in dance where ballet is at the top and it's very popular and it's what people immediately think of when they think of dance. And then in a far second place comes contemporary with jazz and hip hop. But all the folk dances and cultural dances have been almost forgotten in that way because this is where we came from. Yet when we think of dance today, we don't think of folk dances and cultural dances necessarily. And we'll see online or on TV many times, and we just get a single view of what dance is. We don't, not only are the individual dancers labeled, but I think the entire definition of dance can end up labeled as well, which brings you back to the idea that dance nowadays is more about the final product. So leading that into choreography, it makes it more about the final piece than the process of creating it. And I think a lot of people would agree with me when I say that the process of choreographing something can be just as meaningful as the dance itself, or having a piece choreographed on you, because it helps the person discover themselves. It helps the choreographer discover parts of themselves and parts of the world around them and make new connections, new inferences. So this is what we're really trying to convey to an audience as we perform. So I really hope that in the future there's going to be more opportunities in the dance world, because it's a really hard field to break into, and there are so many good dancers and so few jobs. And I understand that dance isn't seen as an essential profession in the same way that a teacher or a medical professional is. But if you think of essential jobs, when the entire world just shut down earlier this year, when COVID happened, what happened? People took to painting and drawing, and in Italy, people were sitting on their balconies, and people came back to the arts and they found their comfort in it. And we forget how crucial the arts can be to our kind and our physical and mental well-being. So I guess that's my hope for the future, is that not only do we feel a more important part in our society, but that people will realize how incredibly essential art is, and that we in our jobs are going to be valued and seen as important as they really is. So to sum up, I think the future of dance is going to be anything and everything, because dance is something that never stops and never will stop evolving. We just need to stop putting labels on things and remember why we created dance in the first place. And it's meant to bring people together and tell stories and to empower people and give them ways of expressing themselves. And this is what's really important, because dancing and choreography, it is limitless. And I was able to hear a little bit from last week's artist talk, and it felt really encouraging to hear some of the stories of the other choreographers and the successes that they've reached, because it makes me really hopeful and inspired to keep working hard. And I love the kind and the friendly tone that the dancers have, supporting each other and holding each other up, which is really quite different from the ballet world that I grew up in. So I guess some advice would be that I heard from last week's choreographers, and I carry with me that advice, which is it's okay to get a lot of no's in the dance world. It's a part of growing. Rejection is something that you simply can't avoid in this career choice, and there's a lot of things to be learned from every no that you get. And then you also have to make connections. So a lot of the dance world is built on connections nowadays. So talking to people, showing other dancers support, and showing that you're out there. So I think my final advice would be to reach out to your mentors and learn from the people that are ahead of you. So Amanda White has been an incredible mentor, and so are you, Jessica. You've always continued being there with your support and showing the way. So thank you. If you had any more questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, well, Lynn, that was beautifully articulated. I love the idea of where, as individual dancers, we say that to ourselves, like, why did you start dancing? But also to society, like, why did we create dance? What inspired us to dance in the first place? To create rituals and share stories and our history and culture. So I think that's very beautiful. Thank you for that notion.
Thank you.
So well rounded. And Lynn, before you go, I just want to remember, how old were you when you came to our mentee program? I think you were our youngest one. You were 13.
Yeah, I was the youngest one. I was 13.
You're 13. Amazing. And you came with your beautiful, loving, supportive mother,
Yes.
which is so great. And I remember you guys were headed to Sweden after for the Midsummer Nights in Sweden, which was I remember it very clearly. I remember your mom, and I think that she's here with us tonight as well. And so shout out to her for being such an incredible support to you and the dance community as well, because she's a beautiful photographer. So thank you so much, Lynn. We'll give you a little break and we'll have you back for our Q&A. Beautiful and articulate and young and full of inspiration.
Thank you.
Amazing. So we have our final guest this evening. And after that, we'll go into our full panel discussion. And so our final guest this evening is Andrew Harper. Andrew, there you are. Hello. Please, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself and to share with us your story and your work.
Awesome. My name is Andrew Harper. My preferred pronouns are he, him, and I'm coming to you from Noonan, Georgia, which was Creek land. I'm also super caffeinated. I was feeling a little draggy midday, and so I got my coffee on, and now I'm like wired. Okay, so I grew up in North Carolina. I went to North Carolina School of the Arts for ballet performance for college. I knew pretty early on that I was interested in choreography. I think I was sort of afraid to admit it to myself because I knew how hard that career choice would be. I also find, I find a lot of dancers have they are drawn to dance because of the kinesthetic element, like they just love to feel their bodies move. And I think for me, I think my attraction to dance and choreography is a bit more like, I like the puzzle of it. I'm a bit more cerebral than I am physical. So I think part of my journey to choreography was like realizing that I needed to push myself to succeed as a dancer in some way in order to gain knowledge to take that into my choreography. So that was a bit of a roadblock, but being at NCSA for 4 years was a big step in the right direction there. Post-graduation, I moved to New York City. I had a Keenan Fellowship at Lincoln Center Education, which gave me the opportunity to have income when I moved to New York, and part of that program was having sort of structural or unstructured free time where I could take class or network or create my own work or do a number of things. So I was super grateful to have that to start out my life in New York. I lived in New York for 7 years. I lived the freelance dancer life, which meant a lot of side jobs and a lot of weird dance gigs. I did a Disney holiday gig. I danced for Ben Munisteri, which was super kind of Cunningham modern type deal. I did some contemporary ballet work, just kind of all over the spectrum there. Most of my freelance dance career, I did a lot of opera performance. I got a gig at the Glimmer Glass Opera Festival in upstate New York, and that sort of launched me into dancing for Washington National Opera and Lyric Opera of Chicago, which got me into choreographing for opera as well and creating on non-dancers as well as dancers. I really started my choreographic journey in high school and then took it with me into college, where I was creating a lot during my time there. It was really a priority for me to use the resources that I had there to make as much work as possible and to learn as much about that as possible. Moving to New York was definitely a tricky thing for that because it is so expensive to produce things, and you start to get into hiring dancers and getting people, that element was very difficult. And so part of where I sort of found a pathway into making that work for me was in creating dance film. I got into that world by creating music videos for a couple of different artists that I knew. And I think there was part of my desire to create for camera was that I was kind of seeing my work that way anyway. Like, when you're watching dance in a theater, you can sort of choose anything that you want on stage in terms of what you're viewing. And as I was like choreographing in my head, I would always like consider it from one perspective. And this is in the foreground and this is in the background, which is exactly what I do now when I create for camera. And I think the other big thing was I was applying to all of these festivals and competitions and whatever, and I always had like crappy video footage because you like work super hard to like get the piece there, but then you didn't have enough rehearsal time, and then it's like not what you thought it was going to be. And so there was a major desire within me to have good video quality and to have it be exactly what I wanted it to be, which push creating things specifically for camera. I can be so specific in the edit. I can be so specific in which takes are chosen, and I can coach the dancer on the day on the set to get it right for that moment. And so I feel like I'm able to produce work that feels like it's a better representation of me. And so that venture into dance film has really opened quite a few doors for me in terms of being more successful in my application endeavors, and also in terms of changing the way that I think about my work and the kinds of work that I can make. What else? Oh, COVID life. Wow. I was living in New York still at the time when everything went down. I stayed in New York for about 3 months of it. I was like alone in my apartment, not really making much. We didn't really know how long this was all going to be. So I'm like, great, we'll just take a vacation and detox from dance and all of that. But as it pressed on and on, I have explored more with creating virtually. While I was still in New York, I created a dance film, sort of what Cisco was talking about with asking dancers to be collaborative in the creative process and coaching them on how to capture their own video footage, which was a new experience that I worked on with my collaborator, Catherine Henley. And then I made the jump and I moved to Georgia. I have family in the area, which is great. And I just really felt like now that everything is becoming much more virtual and that's a more accepted practice, I felt like there was really nothing keeping me in New York in the way that there was before. And so I've been here for about 2 months, just over 2 months. And I've already had some good experiences. I had a fellowship with Jacob's Pillow a few weeks ago, where I did absolutely everything from home. All of the meetings, all of the rehearsals, everything was done via Zoom. So it's been interesting to sort of see how the art world has been able to sort of like decentralize from New York, and artists that I know are everywhere. And that has become a lot more acceptable in terms of how we are creating and where we can physically be as we create. So that's kind of, I think we're up to date in terms of where I am now. Yeah, so that's it.
So this is perfect segue. I'd love to hear more about the Jacob's Pillow and Weston Hicks Choreography Fellow. What is that? Because that's the last thing that
Yeah, that was my most recent experience. So that was the Hicks Fellowship. Generally, on an ordinary year, I think that program's been around for maybe 3 years now. And ordinarily, that would mean going to Jacob's Pillow and spending 10 days there with 2 dancers and creating and being mentored by the amazing directors, Risa Steinberg and Diane McIntyre. Because we're in the COVID times, we did they're like, we're going to do an experiment. Like, if you're in, we're going to do everything virtually. Are you okay with that? And so there were 8 choreographers selected. I was the only one that was not physically in the same location as my dancer. He's someone that Ricky Walters, I worked with him a lot. He's living in Rochester, New York. And so we created entirely on Zoom for 7 days, and we got feedback on that process. And so I was able to start on a new work as a part of that time.
And is there is there kind of a follow through with the fellowship? Do you get presented from the work that you created?
Well, I think one of the things that I was most excited about with this, and that they reiterated a lot during our time there, is that this is just sort of like the start of building a relationship with Jacob's Pillow. Like, now we're in touch, and they want us to stay in touch and be updated about what we're doing. There also is a second part that will start in November. We are able to choose a mentor within the field that we want to learn from and work with. And so they get paid more mentorship time as a part of that. Those mentors have not been released yet. We submitted options for who we wanted to work with. And so once I know that, we will start in November and have them work with us and not learn from them and all of that. So there is sort of a second part coming. Yeah.
And prior to this like digital world that we're living in, you did already dabble in dance film, you said, right? And I love to hear when we spoke, you kind of like detailed everything really like bullet points. I think about it. What are you know, some of the surprises that have surfaced in the dance on film creative process, production process? What are some of the things that are different, or that you think about that is off of when you create stage works?
Yeah, so the first big thing I think is I'm very much, having worked in a number of different mediums, having created for opera and for concert dance and for, you know, and for film, I'm very aware of when you're operating inside of a medium, it's like a really good idea to sort of take full advantage of what that medium can provide. So for me, for working on film, like I always think like, what about this particular work could not happen live? Like how are we in an interesting location? Or are we compiling two scenes at the same time? Are we seeing the same dancer in two different places at once? Like what can film do that that live performance can't do? Because otherwise you're like, why are we just doing this live, right? So that's the first big thing. I also noticed that collaboration, my relationship to collaboration changed as a result of film. I grew up doing visual art and playing the piano, and I often do a lot of different things for my pieces. I create costumes, I create sets or props or whatever. I'm very interested in being hands-on in a number of different aspects of the process. I think for me, for film, there were sort of two major things that changed. One, and this is true for performance, but it really is true for film. It's like you have an 8-hour shoot day on one day. You cannot do everything. You cannot be everywhere. You need different eyes. You just can't do everything. So it opened me up to like releasing the reins a little bit and be like, you know, I need to have other people in the room that are going to help me out, one, with executing my vision, but also like, what are they bringing in their unique voices, and like how is that enriching the work that I'm doing as well, right? So it's not just about like assistance, it's about like how can we like have a unified vision, but also create something that's a little bit more textured. But also that changed the way that I feel like I try to communicate about my work. I think that I don't know, I feel like I get bored talking about things that I feel like I already know. So like if I have an idea for a piece, I would much rather just like do it. Like, let me just show you and then we can talk about it. But I think that one of the big things that I've learned with collaboration is that it's really important to communicate really clearly and to articulate your ideas really clearly so you can make sure that everybody's on the same page about things. And in the process of that, I feel like I've gotten better at really getting down to the core of what my ideas are choreographically, and like if we're creating a piece, like what is this really about? We can go on and on like in this like ephemeral world about what this could be, but like at the end of the day, like there needs to be, even if that isn't what the audience is going to get from it, I feel like there needs to be some core idea that we are, you know, we can all be on the same page of like what we're trying to do here. And so I think that has forced me to sort of, or forced, but encouraged me to try to like be better about speaking about my work in general, which I think is an important thing in terms of how we advocate for ourselves as artists. And, you know, I think that most people in general industries are required to talk about what they do. And I think that's, you know, artists should be held to that same standard, you know?
Yeah, you mentioned actually earlier that your application, I forget how you said it, but I guess your application track record shifted when you dabbled more into film. Do you have a sense of why? Is it the you know, why? Do you think?
I think it's two things. I think one, I've gotten better about writing about my work. And, you know, I think I don't know, I can't say this in particular, but I think it's kind of two things that I notice that people respond to is one, like really like honing your idea. I think that so much of when we think about like people writing about their work for a grant or whatever, it's always very general. It's kind of like, you know, it could be anything. But I think there's also something, I think people respond to me well when I can like relate, like be really honest and really personal about what I'm creating about. Like the thing I worked on for Jake's Pillow, I'm like, you know, I'm really thinking a lot about being lonely and about dating apps and about like how we're, you know, it, like that's something that everybody can relate to, right? So it like takes it down from this like high art kind of level and brings it into like a more like relatable space. And I think the other big thing, it's funny when I look back on past applications, I would spend a lot of time writing something and I would feel kind of okay about how that was, but I would always like feel like the work samples that I was submitting were not the fullest expression of what I could offer. right? Like, you're like, it's close. Like, it's, I just wish it was different. I wish the dancers had gotten this concept more. And I feel like now, like, particularly with the two things that I'm submitting, this a film Bones that screened at ADF this past summer, and a piece that I made on students at UNCSA Dance last summer. Those pieces, I'm like, that is what it needs to be, and it's for the former, it's a dance film. So I was really able to clearly edit what I wanted. And for the latter, with it being a live work, there was a tremendous amount of coaching that went into creating that 8-minute work in over 5 weeks. We so like what the students were giving, I was actually able to they were able to bring it to life in the way that I really wanted it to, which was pretty amazing, actually. But yeah, I think presenting work that I am truly proud of as a part of the application process, I think has changed things for me.
And we talked about, you just created a work on 25 students, right? That was the last thing.
Between the ages of 14 and 18. So that was an interesting exercise. Not only, I don't know, I think as a choreographer, it's partly about manifesting what you want, what your vision is in a real way. But I think the other thing, and the thing that I kind of love about it a lot, I mentioned the kind of puzzle element, is like, okay, I have 25 students. One, I have to manage that number of people, and you have to be, there's a lot that goes into that, but it's also, you have students at varying levels, and you have to use everybody. So it's like, how am I going to, what strengths do people have, and how do we really play those strengths? Because everybody has them, right? But sometimes we're so eager to oh, that's exactly what I need, and I discard everything else. So it was interesting to kind of really delve in and be like, how can we best utilize everybody to create something that feels, and I think also as well with that age group, it was, I ended up creating, I had them emulating Instagram photos or creating live boomerangs in real time. It's like, how do you engage? I think it was a good experience, because I feel like I got them on my side in terms of we're excited about what we're doing, because I feel like with that age group, it can really go either way.
Did you remember your time at NCSA, and did you ever work with a guest choreographer?
Well, it's interesting. That's it's funny, when I was there last summer, last summer, it was 10 years since I had been there as a student in the summer program. So it was definitely on my mind for sure. I think one thing that I think about a lot, when I've danced for other choreographers, I really appreciate, and different dancers want different things, right? Some people really enjoy, you tell me exactly what to do, and I will try to give you exactly what you want. And I'm not one of those dancers. I really like when I work with a choreographer, there to be dialogue, and they ask about what I think, and then I try to figure out what's in their head and try to bring that to life. That is what's interesting to me. And so I try to give that opportunity to dancers and students that I work with, where it's okay, these are the concepts that we're working with. Can you manipulate this phrase? And there were, it's amazing to see what people are capable of. Even students, when you can be specific about direction, and when people feel that they have agency within a process, because I think that sort of is also is a major factor in community building. Because you're much more invested in something when you feel like you have your hands in creating it yourself, right? So I know that's something that I really crave as a dancer, and so I try to give that opportunity to dancers as well, especially students.
And lastly, before we bring everyone else back, do you think this time during the pandemic has changed you as a person, artist, or not?
Yeah, I think one thing I was thinking about earlier, it's funny, we're dancers, we have some sort of side job, right? Or something to make money. And so prior to this, I was working at Equinox as a group fitness instructor, which was amazing. And it taught me so much about being able to coach verbally, and it was amazing. But during this time, I've made quite a bit of money, most of my income has come from selling paintings and clothes that I make. I think it's interesting. I feel like the mood prior to COVID really favored people that chose to specialize with their lives. You know, like I think that Instagram is the perfect example of that. Like you do better on Instagram when you commit to doing only one thing. Like if you're going to be a thirst trap account, that's all you do. And if you're going to be a dance account, that's all you do, right? Like that's the only thing that you can. And if you try to do something else, people are like, oh, you're like stay in your lane, or like, you know, there's an assumption that if you are good at more, if you try to be good at more than one thing, it's like that kind of like jack of all trades, master of none thing, right? Where it's like, oh, you must not really be that good at anything because you're not like committing to that one thing hard, right? And I feel like COVID has been a really interesting experience because it has started to favor people that can think of themselves in more of a three-dimensional way. Like what Cisco was talking about, like with if you're asking a dancer to film content for you, right? Like it's not just about who can get their leg the highest anymore. It's about who is able to see, to communicate clearly verbally, who is able to like use different tools around them and be innovative with the way that they see their space. And like there's just a lot of different things that come into play. So I feel like for me personally, COVID has sort of like empowered me and enabled me to like embrace other skill sets that I have. Whereas before I was like, oh, I'm just going to be a choreographer. I'm going to try not to do any of the other stuff because then people won't take me seriously. It's like, you know what? Like I'm going to start writing dialogue for a piece because that feels right now. Like there's no longer this fear of like, I will only be see this one way, and that's the only thing that I can do. It's like I think that people feel a lot more freedom to explore the fullest extent of who they can be artistically.
Yes, so true. That's exactly what it was. It was when everything shut down, we just did whatever we could do. It was a new form of hustle. Let's hustle,
Exactly.
Let's figure it out. And you're using all the tools in your toolbox to navigate through this crazy world. So beautifully said. I think on that note, I'd love to bring everybody else back. Andrew, stay with us. Woo. Hello.
Hello. Oh, my light changed.
Oh.
There's some lighting design going on. My sound design changed also. Sorry.
So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Neysha and to facilitate our Q&A with our amazing, diverse panel who are in all different parts of the country and have experienced so much in their career.
Right. So I actually want to start with the question that we were just asking Andrew for the rest of our contestants here. Well, I actually just want to say that I wholeheartedly agree with what you said, Andrew, about, finding ourselves as three-dimensional people in this pandemic. I felt that like 100%, everything that you were talking about before. Everybody's like, hey, no, you should put your Instagram as like just dancer, or nobody's going to take you seriously. That's something that's like super, they were cutthroat about it before. And now it's like, no, you notice that, people are real estate agents, or they're really good at selling clothes. They're really good at making pillows, really good at doing all this amazing things. So I just want to thank you for that amazing answer, because it really does, you kind of put it in a much more like beautiful way. It was very articulate, and I appreciate that. So moving on, Francisco, I would like to ask you how you think COVID has changed you as not only a dancer, but as a person.
I've started journaling a lot more. I'm what's the word I was looking for? I'm a frequent meditator, so I practice meditation. And at some point I was like, man, I got all this time. I'm getting up early. So I came to San Antonio because I was helping my sister take care of the kids. She's a single mom and a nurse. And,
oh, wow.
And I had to get up a little extra early because I had to meditate, make my breakfast, do my stuff, massage my feet, all the dancer stuff that you do when you're 42. And then I was like, well, I miss journaling. So I have time to journal if I get up just a little bit earlier. So I started journaling. And one of the things that came up for me, and I want to echo Andrew also for putting it so eloquently, is this reflection, and I'm paraphrasing in my own way, but this reflection and this opening up of yourself to your other interests and your other loves. So one of the obvious things for me was that I have spent a very dense amount of time with my niece and nephew. And they've watched me in this room right here teach several classes, set Paul Taylor's rep, choreograph, just improvise and make up random things on the spot. And they see me exercising every day. So I'm connecting with them in a different way also. And then the other thing is like, I lived in New York for a very long time, and I didn't have a yard. I didn't have a front lawn or backyard lawn. So I go outside and I'm taking care of my sister's lawn and I'm connecting with the earth. And this is something that as I'm doing it, I'm recalling the sensibilities of little Cisco at 9 years old, when he used to like dig in the dirt and, play with his GI Joes and bury them up to their neck. And, like there's all these memories start flooding back in. And as that's happening, I'm also creating. So I'm constantly making projects for myself. So as that's happening, I'm constantly creating. And so this sense of groundedness is showing itself in my movement practice lately. And Jessica and I are gyrokinesis, gyrotonic practitioners. So that So that has also sort of amplified this sense of rooting, but also connecting with something that's the centers of your body, however you want to think of those. And one of the little dance films I made was, I titled it "The Land" because I was really struggling with, as a lot of us were, this displacement of not being around my creative hub and not being around my friends, being in San Antonio where there's not a burgeoning, exciting art scene, or a group of artists that I know and that I can connect with. So like, how do I connect now, reconnect with who I am, who I was, my Hispanic roots, my father who died when I was 30, whose DNA is in me, but in the land also. So those things, it's a very profound, it's a very long description to your answer, because I've been doing a lot of reflection on myself. So, and the world and the state of the world and how we connect. So.
That was beautifully put. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yes, I'm also a gyrotonic, and we were just pre-training for gyrokinesis, and it's totally true that land, rooting your feet into the ground, not only the studio floor, we were actually doing it outside, our pre-training, which kind of connected us even more. Would you agree, Jessica?
Yeah. So, the dance world is very small and we all know each other in some form or another. And so Francisco actually trained with Miriam, Neysha, and they danced together, and he originated the male track of one of her pieces that she performed at Nyla that I saw. I didn't see Cisco perform in it, but it's this crazy way that we've all found each other. But for Cisco, I was telling you that Neysha and I did a pre-training, and we were outdoors and we felt the earth every day, every day. And it was beautiful. After our pre-training, we were kind of bummed for a few days. We were like, oh man.
For sure.
But yeah, Miriam Barbosa Dance is a beautiful teacher that I've deeply connected with during this time. And she took us on that journey. I'd been taking from her over Zoom, and that was another way. I'm a gyrotonic trainer, but I'm pre-training in gyrokinesis right now. But I was able to take a lot more class from Miriam during this time. So yeah, I just needed to connect those dots because Neysha knows Miriam, and
I think I remember Miriam talking about it before. Well, now going on to Lynn, how has quarantine or COVID-19 changed the way that you think as an artist, or feel as a person, or feel as a three-dimensional being?
I think in general it's had to change how I'm going to see the future, because we're not going to go back to dancing the way we did for a while. We're not going to be back on stage for a while or in an auditorium. So we kind of have to start getting used to making dance films and choreographing and learning choreography over Zoom and basically doing everything that we did before, but now in separate places, which is definitely going to be an interesting thing to learn how to do. But I think there's also a lot we can do with it. Um, with our Zoom platform, we can make all these really cool arrangements where people are dancing together, even though they're apart. And I think as a person, quarantine has probably changed me in the way that I used to be a very go, go, go person. There was always something happening. I was always at a class, or I was sleeping, or I was working on something. And now, for the first time in like 4 years, I've had a chance to just read a book, have some free time, listen to my music. And I think that's been really affecting my dance brain as well, because the way that I choreograph, it's much more simplistic, I feel, because while I was trying to come up with all these elaborate ideas um, before quarantine, I've been able to look at all these tiny details that I haven't even noticed before, that I've just brushed past because I'm trying to get to the next place. And I feel like if we stay still for a second and realize it's really around us, there's so much that we can take in and learn from. And that's really affected just me as a person in general. Yeah.
Yeah, what a great answer. I love how articulate all three of you are, and all your answers are super intelligent in many different ways. It's very incredible. I just love hearing other people's perspectives as well. So I'm very grateful to be part of this discussion. So we have a question from Rika. She asks Cisco and Andrew, what is your best advice for a choreographer slash dancer coming to New York in regards to finding contacts and work? I guess we'll start with Andrew and then we'll go to Cisco directly after.
All right. Oh man. It's funny. I just left that world, so it's kind of like.
Yeah. Well, you both aren't there now, but you know, just like.
Yeah, I think. I think the biggest thing that I would say, and this is what I've heard, I don't know, it is to take every opportunity that comes your way to start. At some point in that process, you will have to like start to value yourself more than that and be like, no, I'm worth more. So like, I'm not going to work for free anymore. But you know, like I did, like, for instance, the first music video that I choreographed, like I didn't get paid for it, but it like, one, I have now a connection with that artist where I've been able to use her music for free, which is music rights are a big deal for film, even more so than live work, because there's so many like loophole things to jump through. So but also like it connected me more with that medium. And so I think taking every opportunity and applying for everything is a big one. I also, the other thing that I would say, and this is something to speak a little bit to Jessica's question earlier for me as well, in terms of like why my applications are more successful now. I think when I was at the UNCSA fellowship last summer, Helen Pickett was a mentor for us there. And she talks a lot about like finding what your thing is, like your niche as a choreographer, like what is it about you that's different than everybody else? Because I mean, we were talking about earlier, like there's a lot of people that do it, right? So it's like, what is going to be your thing? And like for her, for me, she's like, dance film is your thing. Like you're doing it. I mean, like, again, a lot of people are doing it. So I certainly don't like need to, you know, there's a lot of people that are in that medium, especially now. But like at the time it was, you know, if you're doing that and you're doing it well, that automatically is going to set you apart from other people, right? So it's just kind of, it's like finding like what is going to be your voice and what you're going to do that no one else can do. I mean, I guess it's kind of like that with any product, but I think that's definitely something to consider. Although I will say with that as well, let's go, again, I'm conflicting here. If you, depending on how new you are to choreography, I feel like when I first moved to New York, you see choreographers that are successful and they are people that brand themselves really clearly, right? Like if you're going to like a Camille A. Brown show, you know what you're going to get. Like, you know what her work is about and like that. But that's not to say that that's what her work was like when she was in her early years of choreography, because you have to explore and see what you're all about. And like, if you try to brand yourself too quickly, you're going to like cut off a lot of things that could be really unique to your work. I feel like my brand has changed a lot in the last 2 years specifically. So I think sort of be open to exploring and taking new things in, but also like think about what you're bringing to the table that's unique as well.
I agree.
Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I agree. I was just reading a book, and it was just talking about, it's a branding book, but also a self-help book. And it talks about, you know, razor sharp focus about your ideas, like having that razor sharp focus and finding something that no one has touched upon and making that like part of your brand. I think that's super important. And if Cisco, if you can continue to talk about, add this onto, you know, the earlier question, you know, how has your writing and the way that you talk about your work gotten better throughout the years as well? If you can just add that on to the question.
Okay, yeah, because yes to everything Andrew said, 100%. I think Andrew was actually mentioning this, and it totally resonated with me because I've been talking about this in my journaling, is that everything you start to talk about, everything you start to bring to the creative process, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be your writing, however that comes out. It could be your writing, it could be your humming a random tune, whatever moves you, whatever makes you feel like you're engaging with your creativity is the right thing to do. So if we're talking practically about New York, I would, you know, when I first moved to New York, I knew no one. And all I did was like, I went and I just took every class I could. I introduced myself to everyone I could. And I took a lot of jobs that didn't pay well. So I think there's a value in my experience. There's a value in just doing the work, putting the work in. Go to a studio and rent a studio for 2 hours twice a week, and just get in there with yourself and feel your impulses and harness that. Because then, as Andrew and Neysha were talking about, the branding comes out of your own voice. And there's a thing called that I like to talk about a lot. It's called flow. Csikszentmihalyi wrote a book named called Creativity and Flow. And there's a place where you get where everything just kind of, time is non-existent. Place, who you are, identity, gender, it just goes away and it becomes you in the creative space. And that's where your branding comes from. That's where you come from, and that's how you stand out from everyone else. So I don't know if I really answered that question, but I did want to cover all that stuff and highlight what Andrew was saying.
No, yeah, that was perfect. If you could just like link that book in our chat, I wanted to read it, because that sounds like it'd be very helpful. You know, flow is something that's super important, and, you know, taking away everything else and just seeing like who you are as a person is very important, especially not if you want to stand out in New York, but, you know, just to be a successful dancer, you can't be afraid to be yourself. And yeah, great answers. Thank you so much. I have a question for Lynn. I love that. I love how you stated earlier how the ritual of dance has kind of been lost. And it's really funny because the last dance that we did with our C3 finalists last year is called Woven Rituals. But the ritual of dance has been lost. And I read another book that talked about how the process-based thinking has been replaced with product-based thinking. So instead of, you know, caring about the process, we just care about the product. And you kind of mentioned that with commercial dance and how it's, or well, not commercial dance, but how dance has been commercialized in general. How do you think that as a next generation of dancers like me and you, how can we go back to process-based thinking instead of product-based thinking? It's my question for you. Sorry, it's very hard.
Yeah,
That's a big one, but I was just
that is a big question. I think there's different ways that you could do it. I think you could definitely start with, instead of having that finished product, so of course we're still going to have films and music videos and performances. Almost, if you use the dancing to help other people, so use it as a way to go to the people that don't have access to education and take them and give them dancing as a way to spend their free time. And this way you're connecting with other people and helping them, because it's almost like thinking of not doing it for the money. Because if you're doing something just for what you're going to get out of it, I sometimes feel kind of like, what's the point if you're just going to get money out of it? Which I know I'm really young to be trying to answer that question. But I feel like you have to enjoy the process of doing something and the purpose of doing something for it to be meaningful, because otherwise it's kind of like, what are you putting your time into? Because if you're just doing something to create a final product that's going to help other people that you don't enjoy at all yourself, then what was the meaning to you to even do that project? You have to be invested in what you really do. So I think we can still have the different commercial based dancing that's based on videos and performances, but I think it has to be much more meaningful to a person themselves. And I think that you have to be able to relay that to the audience instead of just, sometimes you'll see dancers dancing in the background of a clip or in a TV show. You have to make something more out of that, make it meaningful. What's the purpose of this? How is this going to help other dancers? How is this going to help the dance community grow? And how do we tie that back to how dancing is a part of culture? Because we need to do it as a way to help it's going to sound so big, but our society, the same way that I was talking about how in COVID, this is where people have been able to find their comfort. I think this is what we need to tie it back to in the future, is how it's something that's so essential to our kind.
I wholeheartedly agree. That was such a great answer. And I think you're only 16 years old? Oh my gosh. And where do you find California? That's where you are right now?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles.
Well, well, I just appreciate, hearing from another fellow mentee, because I was in the mentee program as well. I was a little bit older, but like just to hear you and your experience with Jessica, and I feel the exact same way, and for her to find young dancers like us is very inspiring, and she helps us. Yeah, she brings us up and helps us kind of, I want to say, curate our brand. Like we just
Definitely.
she fine tunes us as people as we grow up, and it just feels so good. So it's someone as young as you, just talk about these beautiful things. And I think it's important that we have lost a lot of purpose in dance, and I think all of you have touched upon that in some way or another in your conversations with in your questions with me or your conversations with Jessica, which is super important. That just means we're all doing really meaningful work. And for the last question, I would like to hear, are there any self-care tips that you could recommend that have been helping you? And we can start with you right away, Lynn. Just one self-care tip for, everyone out here.
I think try to put your own physical and mental well-being first if you have extra time, because that's going to affect how you do jobs for other people. So if you want to improve how you're going to be able to affect other people, you have to focus on yourself first. So that's probably my tip.
Nice, thank you. And then we'll go back to Cisco. Can you give me one self-care tip for everyone?
The best thing I've done for myself is just told myself to breathe, practice generosity, and it's really easy to get down on yourself if you start to compare yourself on dude one and dude two are making these really cool things, and I'm not making anything. What's that about? Once you start down that road, it's a slippery slope. So your journey is valuable, whether you're abundantly creative right now or not. There's something coming out of you, but don't force it, and don't put any extra pressure on yourself, and breathe.
Beautiful, thank you. And Andrew?
I think for me, I think this is something that Cisco touched on a little bit. Following your own instincts and your interests. I think that one thing that can be tricky as an artist and a choreographer is to when you start to compare and you see what other people are doing, or I think that part of finding your own identity as an artist is committing to really embracing the things that interest you about the world and the things that interest you in your work. And so I think that be honest with yourself about what you're interested in, what you bring, where you want to go with your work, right? Because I think that a lot of people I don't know, maybe I think just being honest with yourself about those things is important.
Nice. Okay. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you today. We have time for one last question. Anybody on our YouTube? I don't see anything coming up, but if something pops up, so we'll just take it away. Jessica, please. Thank you. And I'm so grateful for all your answers today and just to hear this, beautiful feedback. Thank you so much for being part of this discussion with us. And I hope to see you all soon. Maybe one day.
I just want to say, well, first of all, that the mentees, I feel like you ladies find me because the mentee program is something that we created. It's a very small program and we do promote it, but I do feel like mentees like come and find us and participate in it. So it's very rewarding on my side too as well. And so I want to finish by saying, please follow these artists. We have included links of things that they have spoken about in our chat box, but as well as in the description of this video, you'll see the links to see what they're working on and to continue to follow them. And next week we have three other semi-finalists. We have Aliyah Cachet, Rohan Barkov, and Shang Zhu. And it'll be next Tuesday at 6 p.m., Tuesday the 29th. And so if you're able to come back and join us, please do. It'll be a whole new group of artists. This evening was so beautiful and very grounding. And I want to thank you, all three of you, and Neysha, for being here with me tonight. And to our audience, thank you for being with us. And if you are able to donate to the arts, please do donate to these beautiful artists. And if you want information on how to join CHEN Project's annual fund, that's on our website and all of that. But keep showing up, and we will say good night here. Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Neysha, do you want to take a screenshot?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry. One more thing before we go. We're going to take a screenshot of
Let me
that.
take these stupid.
Let me take these.
Neysha, will you do it or should I do it?
I gotcha. All right. One,
right.
2, 3. There we go.
Hey. All right. And on that note, we'll say good night, good evening. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all next week. Or not see you, but
Thank you.
Have a good night.